How do you take care of your health and fitness as a musician? How do you make sure you're always performing at your best? That's what we're going to be looking at in this episode of the New Music Industry Podcast. You're listening to the New Music Industry with David Andrew Weeb. Today I'm chatting with fitness and health expert Yannick Tungley. How are you today, Yannick?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for asking. So you mentioned that you used to be a musician yourself and that you had your fair share of health issues. Sounds like there's a bit of a story there. So tell us what happened.
Yeah. So I studied music. I went to college, and my main focus was double bass and production. And along the way during my study time, I developed some pain in my elbows, in my shoulders. I had some tendonitis, and then it went up to the neck and then down the spine. So it became chronic back pains, and I did try to get some support, but the director at the time in the school laughed at me when I was speaking about going to the swimming pool and trying to eat healthy, because he was not convinced that jazz music and health or fitness goes well together. And later on, when I did my master, the school said, yeah, you could do Alexander Technique, but it's actually a program that's reserved for classical musician. And I was in the jazz department. So it was just there, but I really had no support or expert support, how I could integrate that in my music life and how to make it fit with the instrumental practice. And then, when I graduated, I moved to Berlin, and I did play for a few years as a professional musician, and did also a fair bit of production. And it was just coming back and back and back, those chronic back pain. And one day I woke up and I remember, like, okay, if this is going on, then I have to choose at some point between my back and the music. And even though I love music, I love my back even more because I only have one. And around the same time, a friend of mine wanted to change his career path, and he asked me if I was interested in getting into coaching. And I kind of fell in love with it for different reasons. But because, I was already super interested in understanding how my body functions. And then it's in applying what I was learning to help other people, get better and have better fitness, better movement, that I really started to love that doing this. Until I decided to go fully into that direction and focus only on coaching and fitness. And because of the pandemic, the gym closed in Germany and are still closed. So I had to find some different option to do my work. So now I work online remotely. And because I already did a few workshops as far as fitness goes for musicians back in Switzerland, this is something that kind of came up naturally to decide to go with that population.
Yeah, so there are some things that can sort of naturally occur as a musician. I don't know if your back pain was necessarily a result of that, but sclerosis, for example. I have a minor spinal alignment issue, mostly because of playing guitar, right? Now, I even had friends who ended up with hernias because of playing guitar, and I've never found myself in that situation, but it definitely is good to think about what sort of injuries that you could possibly, you don't want to overthink it or become fearful of it, but it's good to think about what sort of injuries you could sustain. I also had a friend who ended up with tendonitis in his left wrist because of overplaying and over practicing his guitar. So those are the kinds of things that can happen. And it sounds like that's kind of part of your story as well.
Definitely, yeah. And so, pain is something that is very complex, and injuries as well. So it's difficult to say, oh, it was only because of this or because of that. Obviously, the attitude that you have when you are playing, and the mind space you're in when you are performing on stage, definitely has a big influence on how your body is working. But what was kind of interesting and also curious to me, in retrospect, is that there was no, in my curriculum, there was no education whatsoever in that regard. And when when you perform on stage, then you are using your body also as a vehicle. So if you play an instrument, then the instrument becomes the vehicle. But this is something that you use to transmit some emotions. And if the body is not working properly for different kind of reasons, then the performance is not going to be as good as it could be. And there are some actually quite simple things that you can look at that are going to make the performance better, but also, from a longevity perspective, when you go the professional route as a musician, you know how it is. It's difficult to the finances to find the gigs. When you are on tour, you sit for a long time in the bus, and to know how to recover and how to train your body so that you can actually have better and a longer career. I think it was kind of missing, unfortunately.
Yeah, you mentioned several things there that I'm definitely going to be circling back to. But the thing that caught me for sure, and this is always kind of the way that I've thought it's been my paradigm of education, that there's always been some missing pieces. I know it's going to be different in Europe than it is in Asia, where I grew up, or even Canada and the States. The education system's all a little bit different, but there's usually something missing in that equation. And you pointed out, you can go to music school, but where's the physical education program? Where's the phys ed? How do I get in shape? And unless you take it upon yourself to integrate that as part of your life, my friend said the same thing. It was so hard to do. You're supposed to meditate. You're supposed to exercise. You're supposed to sleep, and you're supposed to practice 3 hours a day minimum. And somehow you're supposed to work all that around your family life and your girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely got into that conversation. It's tough. It's not easy to try to balance everything.
It's difficult, and so the fitness world and the music industry, they have some parallel that are quite interesting, and what I found, or what I see now, is that a lot of advices that are given to musicians is just bad advice. So it's bad advice within the fitness industry, and because there's in my opinion, a lack of education and that aspect within the music industry, then there's no filter to understand, what is good, what is not so good, and then you end up stressing out because you're thinking, hey, I have to practice, and then I have to meditate, and then I have to do yoga, and then I have to do strength training, and then I have to do cardio, and then I should pay attention to my nutrition. Whereas there are some specific things that you can do that are actually a bit more simple, and that you could implement very quickly. Also between the practice sessions, if you are teaching between your students, if you're a producer or recording musicians, then between takes, that are really going to make a difference in how fresh you are, how fast you can recover, and so forth and so on.
All right. Yeah. And I'm not Jen Psaki, but we're definitely going to circle back to that. We're actually going to circle back to some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, you can just share your experience with musicians in the industry at large. And I agree that health and fitness is an important one, but I'm sure some listeners are going to wonder, like, what sort of results have you gotten for yourself and others that would make us stand up and pay attention?
Yeah. So it's a difficult question to answer, because in terms of pain, then this is something that is highly subjective, and there's no really an objective metric to that. So I wish I could say like, hey, I had a reduction in pain of 95%, and now I can play for 20 hours in a row, and I feel nothing. So that's not really the case. What I can say though is that carrying my bass around is way easier. I'm not tired if I have to carry my bass amp around. I am not hurting my back if I have to unpack the drum of my colleague, that kind of stuff. And I do recover much faster from long sessions if I have to play, because I am fitter than before. And this is the kind of stuff that I also see in the people that I work with, that they are, and it's funny because they don't really notice it, so they do the program, they do the exercise, they improve the nutrition, and then it's when it's not there, for whatever reason, because they are on holiday, or because at some point they're going to forget to prep their food or to do some exercise, and then it just comes back, and at that point they realize how big of a difference it made, to be moving more, to be paying attention to the nutrition. I hope it's kind of a a valid answer.
Yeah, I think it's a worthy answer. And as you say, I think there are some industries where data sort of seems to apply more, or results of a coach are a little bit easier to quantify. As a longtime musician, coach, and trainer myself, I can honestly say that's not always the case. It's not always quantifiable in like, okay, my gig revenue went up from $200 to $2,000. Not always, right? The difference usually ends up being in like mindset, like how you approach it, how you think about it, how you make sure that you're doing the right things to get the results you want. And that's usually where the biggest difference is in like empowerment. So I hear what you're saying. Now, you mentioned earlier that there's some things you can do to make your performance better. And I'm sure musicians would be wondering what that would look like. So what would you advise?
Yeah. So let me start by saying this. So I have a performance model. It's loosely based on a performance model from Sir Alan Watkins. He's a psychiatrist, I think. And so his model is like an iceberg. And at the very tip of the iceberg, you have the performance. And right underneath it, you have behavior. This is what you can see. And then he asks what is driving the behavior. And the level below that is the psychology. The level below that is the physiology. And then I added two levels to that. One is perception, and the last one is your environment. And when we are looking at performance, it just means the state you are in when the form is changed. So this is something that is happening constantly. It's not only like live performance. When you are producing a track, it's also a performance. When you are working on your business, it's also performance. And so I try to use that as a framework so that I can identify what's the limiting factor. And what I see is that a lot of time, the physiology is a limiting factor, or at least there are something we can improve so that the performance is going to be better, and also the environment. So as far as physiology, the easiest thing you can do is to regulate your nervous system, because this is going to have an impact on the way you are feeling, the decision you are going to make. Because if you are stressed out, then you take different decisions, but also how you interact with your peers, with your colleagues, with your family. And the fastest way to do this is to work on your breathing. And most of the time we are a bit stressed out. or we are a bit too much in the so-called fight or flight branch of the nervous system. And what you can do to go back in the rest and digest mode is to have an exhale that is going to be twice as long as the inhale. So breathe through your nose and then, for example, 3 seconds in and then 6 seconds out. And if you do this for a few minutes, then you are going to notice that it's going to be easier to do than 4 seconds in and then 8 seconds out. And then you can do 5 and 10 and so forth and so on. And this is really going to help you, for example, before you go to bed, bring down the noise that's happening in your head, if that is something that is on your mind, or between takes or when you practice, it's going to help you have better focus. And if you have an interaction with the students or a business partner, then it's going to be to allow you to keep your cool and to have a different perspective on things. So that's always the first one that I use with everybody I work with. And the second one is the nutrition. And what I see most of the time is that people don't enough protein, and they don't eat enough, surprisingly, they don't eat enough calories until they do. So what I mean by that is because it's becoming trendier and trendier to eat healthy and to pay attention to fitness, we tend to restrict a lot of foods that are quote unquote bad. And then we end up having too little calories. And it's actually quite hard to eat enough calories when you're only eating vegetables and, potatoes. And it kind of go on and on and on. And then at some point you are so hungry that you become hangry. And then, just randomly there's a chips mountain in front of you that you're going to eat, or chocolate. It's most of the time either one of those. So this is something that I really try to pay attention to. And then the last one is going to be movement. And movement is going to be, the first thing is just going to be walking more. Because especially right now, with the lockdown and quarantine, I'm not exactly sure how it is where you're based, but here in Europe, it's pretty much closed, a lot of it still. And it's kind of hard to do enough steps because you're just working, so home office, or you're in front of your computer, then go to practice music. And doing like 8,000 or 10,000 steps per day is going to make a big difference in how you feel, how your posture is, how your back is working, how your mind is working. Every cell in your body is going to work just a bit better. And so that's the absolute basic thing that I try to put in place.
You mentioned a lot of great tips there. So if you missed any of them, listener, go back, rewind, listen to them again. I have some important questions about each of them. First was actually if you have the iceberg diagram, or if you don't, if you could just do up a quick sketch and send it over. I think the listeners would appreciate that. What do you think?
So right now, you mean?
Oh yeah, I mean after is okay, but for when we post the content on the website.
Sure, I'll send it to you.
Excellent. Thank you. The other question is, I mean, the whole thing about nervous system, I feel like a lot of musicians are going to relate to that. Many of them wrestle with anxiety. And I also suffered a bit of a burnout September, partly because of overwork and exhaustion, and then partly because of overconsumption of caffeine. I didn't realize that consuming that much caffeine consistently over the long term, what the effects of that would be. Then I thought about it and I said, oh, of course it's going to affect my adrenals and my nervous system in a big way that would eventually result in a very unwanted sort of burnout. So, I mean, that's another thing to caution people for sure, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you said about breathing is helpful. I think meditation could be helpful for a lot of people too. Although I do have to throw in a quick disclaimer that we're not giving health advice. Always go to your physician for proper professional care and health advice. But if this helps you, great. the other thing that I'm sure people are going to be wondering, you mentioned protein, and of course that's super important, but people are going to immediately go to like, okay, so I just need to add more steaks and pork chops and meat to my diet, right? Is that the case, or like what's the best source of protein?
Yeah, so that's a bit context dependent, and I think that the US or in North America, the meat consumption per capita per year is the highest in the world, and I think it's is twice as high as in Germany. So it's going to be a bit different. But what I recommend is to have at least one serving of some form of meat every day, and it doesn't have to be a huge steak. It doesn't have to be like the ribeye. So you're in pounds, so it could be 1 pound of ribeye. It's going to be overkill, but it's something that is going to make a difference. It could be also chicken, turkey. It could be game meat. It could be some sort of fish or seafood. Eggs are also great, and this is actually quite a difficult subject in recent years because especially among artists and musicians, there's a big movement pushing veganism. And so I think if you do this for ethical reason, it's absolutely valid, and you still be absolutely doing this. But as far as nutrition goes, it is problematic in some regards, and this is one case where you have to pay really attention to what you are eating, not just a bit, but really be accurate to what your intake is going to be. But yeah, so a bit of meat. Most of the time, lean meat is going to be a better choice.
Definitely. And I think you raise an important point there too, which is to listen to your body, right? Like I usually eat very, very healthy, and I'm aware when I'm not, which is really helpful because over the years I've modified my diet. It started about 3 years ago. I started working out with a friend, and then gradually I kind of changed things up in my diet. It used to be like I'd throw together a sandwich, or so, like for a long time it was actually macaroni, cheese, and ramen, which is terrible, but I was eating on a budget for a while and gradually upgraded and incorporated other things. And with my friend, then I moved to like, carbs, meat, and salad. It was kind of a little more of a balanced plate. And eventually I moved completely organic as well. But I'm still aware that there's some foods when I eat them, I feel bloated. And if you're feeling bloated or if you're feeling gassy, chances are you're reacting to the food in some negative way. That's not, your body just isn't liking. And so it takes some discipline, I think, some mental discipline to notice when you're reacting to something. But that's something I'm becoming more mindful of myself as I continue to work on the diet aspect of things.
Yeah, this is a very good point, being mindful and listening to your body, because so I think most musicians tend to do this naturally. They are a bit more in tune with what they are feeling. But sometimes the body is constantly communicating and sending signals, and sometimes you have symptoms, and just ignoring them is not going to change anything about it. So being very mindful of what's happening is a very good way. So I always I encourage people to actually just have a food log, because then when you see like, oh, I had this and this for breakfast, and then for the next 3 hours I was bloated, then you can kind of connect the dots and also see what's happening, not only because this is a very direct connection, so you eat something and then you are bloated. It's like, okay, it's probably what I had for breakfast or for lunch. But what's less obvious is, the impact it can have on your mental well-being and on your energy level throughout the day, and on maybe your productivity, and even some pain. I had a friend recently calling me, and he's a musician as well, and he was speaking about back pain between the shoulder blades. And so we talked for a few minutes, and then it came out that his problem was not so much about the movement and the posture, but it was most probably because of the nutrition, because like everything is connected in your body. And when the body is stressed, and it's going to compensate because it's, it's still going to be working in the way it can with what you give your body. And just because he was stressed out and eating too little, then you tend to have a bit more demand on your liver, and then it's tied to his posture and his back pain. And this is something that we have to take into consideration. And it's way easier to do this if you are actually tracking, some of the behaviors that you're implementing.
That's fascinating. I love that you said that. That's all interconnected. And that back pain could be the result of diet and not just exercise or things you're doing wrong. That's wonderful. You mentioned recovery, and I imagine sleep is going to be like a really important part of that. But what sort of things should be part of a musician's routine as they look to recover?
Mm-hmm. So I think recovery has two parts. So one is the actual recovery, and then the other one is to prevent that you have to recover from too much, So at the end of the day, it's going to be stress management. And because there is only so much that we can take in one day. And if you are stuffing yourself with life, it could be coffee, it could be too much food, it could be too much information, it could be binge watching Netflix. It could also be listening to a lot of very loud music. This is going to just have an exciting effect on your whole body, and then it's going to take longer to recover from it. So sleep is definitely one big player, and there are a few things that I think are also backed up by science. Is to not watch very bright lights between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. And this has a suppressing effect on dopamine production. So this is going to be not only for your recovery, but also, for your mental health and mental well-being and your motivation and drive on the next day. So to have those 4 or 5 hours where you are very disciplined and strict to not have too much bright light is going to make a big difference. As far as, quantity of sleep, it's kind of difficult because I remember listening one of the episode of your show with, I think it was Andy Seth, and he was saying that he was sleeping 5 hours per night, which for me it would be too little, but he seems to be doing great with that. So this is something that is also a bit individual. But what I like to have in mind is falling asleep should take no longer than 10 minutes. You should be able to sleep through. And when you wake up, you should be ready to go. And if you need like a ton of coffee or Red Bull or that kind of stuff to get you going, then maybe you are not really recovered the way you could be. And yeah, and then the other part, like I said, trying to not put too much in your bucket is definitely going to help you recover a bit faster.
Excellent tips. Yeah, I think in Andy's case, maybe he has a sleep mutation, or maybe he's just able to make up for it in deep meditation. But I hear you. I think music industry people or musicians in general are probably some of the hardest working people there are. You look at a band like Kiss and they just never stopped. You look like a band like Rush and they would tour and tour and tour and tour in the early days nonstop until they could build a fan base. So I think it's maybe challenging sometimes for musicians to find that balance. Sometimes I find myself, if I go too far to one end, then I'm like, okay, I took on too much, or I'm trying to do too much, or I'm actually doing things that are not effective. And so I have to remind myself to rein it back in and go, what's the 80-20, right? But what are some tips that you have for musicians maintaining balance?
That's a very good question. So just to tie it in to the recovery part, I think one thing that is super important is to be good with the planning of the when you're going to recover, because obviously if you are on tour or if you have hard deadlines for a project, say you're doing some music for a movie, for example, or a video game, or for an album, and you have super strict deadline that you have to respect, then it's not realistic to just expect you to be sleeping like your 9 hours every night when you come closer to the deadline. So what's important though is then afterwards to have some times that is going to be strictly for your recovery, and be able to to recenter yourself, to take care of you, to be less hectic. And I think this is something I think that would be like the most important thing, because I'm not here to say like to every musician, so hey, you have to stop to do the thing that you are doing, because obviously when you're on tour, it's not possible to always sleep like a baby. So I think that would be the most important one. Then when you have like a normal working routine, I think planning the downtime is also super important, because we are pretty good at planning the work block. But then when it comes to recovery, and with recovery, I just mean like, how it's called, intentional disengagement. This is from Andrew Huberman, by the way. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford. And it's the ability to go very hard in one direction, but then go very hard in the other direction in the recovery part. And it could be whatever is working for you. So it could be Tai Chi, it could be playing chess, it could be reading a book, it could be listening to some music, it could be, going for a walk in nature. Those are all going to help, and it works better when you make time for it and you plan it in your schedule.
I love that advice so much. And I'm going to definitely start incorporating some of this stuff. I'm going to see if I can get my 8,000 steps today. And I'm also, when I'm doing my planning, I do my planning every Sunday. I'm going to look at when I need to make sure I'm recovering. Intentional disengagement. I like it a lot. You mentioned good advice for musicians. I think this is going to depend a lot on, and maybe you mentioned a lot of this stuff already. It's probably going to depend a lot on the musician, if they're a singer, if they're a guitarist, if they stand up, if they play sitting down, all that kind of stuff. But what are some general good tips for musicians in their fitness and health?
Mm-hmm. So there's, that the body is very adaptable, and it adapts to what you make him do. So if you are stuck in the same position for the whole day, then it's going to adapt to that. And which is great, because you can become very, very good at playing the piano or playing the drums. But then you also lose some capacity to do different things. And I think because playing music is highly specific and you become very specialized, then the first thing you could do is just to do movements that you don't normally do. So, for example, if you are a guitar player or even a drummer, or I think almost any instrument, you have most of the time your arms just in front of you. And so what you could start doing is just to bring your arms overhead, and even starting doing this without weight is going to be something that is going to be helpful. Now, obviously, we also spend a lot of time sitting, so standing up and doing some squats, for example, is great, because it's going to bring your hips and your knees into position that you normally don't really use. And this is also going to have a positive influence on your back, because you are really connected from your heels to your head. So if you can move, the whole chain, it's going to be great. And because right now, a lot of gyms are closed in my area, in my part of the world. I just start with a lot of body weight exercise, and I try to find whatever weight I can, and put them in a backpack, for example, and use that as a weight. So the most basic thing you can do is going to be squats, push-ups that are great, and some sort of rowing movement. And for that, I use a towel, and I put it around the door, and then I just row back and forth. And those are like the most basic thing that you can do, and it's going to be helpful for you. If you can do pull-ups, then that's great. Then do pull-ups.
Excellent tips. Push-ups, I think a lot of people can do them. I have quite a bit of body weight, and I sit all day with my hand like this on my mouth. And so when I go to do push-ups, I just end up overworking my wrist. I notice this. Mm-hmm. So like I'm a little bit easier on my wrist, but I try to find other ways to strengthen my wrist and my hand. And, but I guess again, it's going to be individual, but for most people, I could see that, it's a really great work exercise to do.
Yeah. So there's one thing that is super important. So I'm a big fan of strength training because it's super time efficient, and it's going to give you also more endurance, because if you have more, like strength is like wealth. And if you have $10,000 in your bank account and you spend 100, then it's not the same as if you have $1,000 in your bank account and you spend $100. And if you are stronger, it's like having a bigger saving account. So it's easier for you to be doing everyday tasks. So we always try to be super progressive in the way that we exercise. And in your particular example of doing the push-ups, what you could do is to start doing push-ups but incline. So your hands are on the table. That's at hip height, for example, and then you start from there. And when you've done 2 weeks of that, and you manage, 4 rounds and 10 reps, then you go down one step with your hands at knee height. And then when you're good with that, then you go on the floor. And at that time, your wrist and the muscles of your forearm are also going to adapt and give you the ability to be doing like normal push-ups.
Thank you. I love that. I'm going to give that a try. Prescription from Yannick. Yeah. Health is wealth. I agree. I love it. So, it's all well and good to exercise and work out and take care of yourself. Is it ever possible to overwork? And is there a point where just too much is too much?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So, the body has a finite capacity to adapt, and there's that analogy of stress bucket. And when the bucket is full, then it's going to spill over, and how do you say, the shit hits the fan. And when we consider working out, then we have to consider everything that's happening in your life. And because working out is a stress, and your body is going to adapt to that stressor and become stronger, so that the next time you try to work out or to do that exercise, you can do just a bit more. And if you have a lot going on, because like I said before, you are on tour, or you have hard deadlines, or you have a project that you are finishing, or you are starting a business, for example, then it's a bit more difficult to be working out and to go all in during your workout. But in terms of number, what I try to do is to have people work out 3 to 4 times per week when it's possible. And sometimes I'll just have to reduce it, either the frequency or the volume of work we are going to do during a workout. So instead of doing 4 rounds of push-ups, then maybe you do just 2, because you have other work to do, or you are stressed out because you just had a breakup, or for whatever reason, or because we have a pandemic starting. So we have to pay attention to that kind of stuff as well.
You're a wise man, Yannick. I love this. So to round out this interview, are there any books that have helped you on your journey?
I was expecting that question. There are a few, and I think one that has been pretty useful and that I found very good is "It Takes What It Takes" by Trevor Moawad, and it's a mindset book. And he works mostly in the field of elite athlete and athletic performance, and just the whole attitude, even in the title, it takes what it takes. So if you want to bring your best performance, then you are going to do kind of whatever it takes to get there. And in most cases, it's going to be a bit easier than what we might be thinking. And one example in the book is of Michael Johnson, who was at one point the fastest man on earth. And he was just saying, like, I do set goals, and but not using like SMART acronym or objective and key results or that kind of stuff. But he was just saying, like, I noticed that when I do the grocery, if I have a list, then I need 8 minutes. And if I don't have one, I need 30 minutes. And this is super easy. This is super practical. And, having that kind of attitude and mindset towards a lot of things that we do is going to help, save some time and energy and resources. So I think this is something that's been great. And I also have two other books in mind. One is called Just Listen, and the other one is called The Coaching Habits. And I think they are very important because I don't remember exactly who the authors are, but like communication is so important, especially nowadays, and the way we speak with ourselves and, obviously with our surrounding is going to be important, but also with ourselves is something that is super, super important, and that can also generate a lot of stress and, feeling unwell, and connecting that to the music. You said it yourself, like there's a lot of anxiety going on, especially right now, because it's difficult to foresee what's going to happen to the whole live music industry and how it's going to evolve. And the way that we speak to ourselves and to our surroundings I think is super, super important. And those two books are great to have a different perspective on that, and to ask better questions and have better interaction with other humans, which I really think I cannot stress it enough how important I think it is.
I love that you thought about this question. And I also love that you weren't afraid to make recommendations outside of music. So often guests will come on and go, "Oh, music books, I'm not really sure," but they've read all kinds of great self-development or business books. And we're always open and happy to have those types of recommendations as well. As far as music books go, get Ari Herstand's, get Donald Passman's, get Jesse Cannon's. They're all amazing books, and get all of my books. I'm not trying to be selfish. I just think they're pretty good. And I want to know what I'm doing wrong, and I know what I'm doing right. So listeners, get all my books. Seriously, I'm not kidding. They're for you. I wrote them for you. So you're going to get something out of them no matter what, I think. Having made it to this point of the interview, what next steps should the listener take to improve their fitness and health?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think that doing the breathing exercise that I gave you at the beginning, just 10 minutes a day, is going to make quite a significant difference. If you do that before you go to bed, for example, or before you eat, is really going to change a few things for you. Trying to hit those 8 or 10,000 steps. I know 10,000, it's also, it takes a bit of time to do it. 8 is realistic for most people. So I would strongly suggest to do this. And then as far as nutrition goes, there are 6 behaviors that I always recommend. So here we go. The first one is going to be eat real meals and try to not snack. Then the second one is try to eat regularly, like every 4 to 5 hours. It might mean that you have to eat 4 times a day. It's absolutely fine. The next one is going to be have some lean protein every day, because this is going to make a big difference. Vegetables, I try to shoot for 600 grams. I think it's like 1 or 1.5 pounds of vegetables. This is doable, and this is going to make a big difference and how you feel in your digestion, in your hunger feeling. So the next one is going to be eat until 90% full. So try to not stuff yourself that you are in a food coma and you have to lay on the couch because it was so much food. And the last one, if you can eat like 80% unprocessed food, then it's going to be absolutely fine to have 20% of, quote unquote fun food. And if you do the math, if you are eating 3 times per day, it's going to be 21 meals in a week, and 90% of that is going to be 18 meals are going to be spot on, and then 3 you can do pretty much whatever you want. And if you implement that, then it's going to make a big difference.
I love it. You're a man with a plan. That's terrific. Thank you for your time and generosity, Yannick. Is there anything else I should have asked?
I was also expecting that question. So
that's awesome.
That's a good one. But I don't have an answer for that. So if people are interested in my work and getting fit, or learning more about what's the connection between music making and fitness, they can. So I do everything on Instagram. My handle is I am Coach Yannick, YANNICK. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions.
Are you feeling pumped up yet? Then why not get pumped up some more? I just published the first issue of our first digital magazine called The Renegade Musician, and right now it's pay what you want. This offer only lasts until the end of March, so if you're ready, head on over to gum.co/renegade musician to claim your copy. That's gum.co/renegade musician. This has been episode 227 of the New Music Industry Podcast. I'm David Anjoui, and I look forward to seeing you on the stages of the world. Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.